The call came at 3 a.m., jolting me awake from a restless sleep. Rebecca's name flashed across my phone screen. My sister, who I hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Not since our father's funeral. Emma, her voice cracked with desperation. Emma, please don't hang up. I need your help. My heart tightened at the sound of her voice, but I remained silent, waiting. 5 years of silence, and now she needed something. Of course she did. It's about Tyler, she continued, referring to her 12-year-old son. He's sick, really sick. His kidneys are failing, and he needs a transplant. I sat up in bed, my free hand clutching the sheets. Tyler, my nephew, who I hadn't been allowed to see since Rebecca took everything. The boy who used to run to me with scraped knees and storybooks, looking at me like I hung the moon. The doctors tested our whole family. Rebecca's voice trembled. You're the only match, Emma. Please, he's just a boy. My name is Emma Sullivan, and 5 years ago, my sister Rebecca orchestrated the perfect betrayal. While our father lay dying of cancer, she spent months poisoning his mind against me, convincing him I was squandering my life on my medical research career instead of starting a family like she had. By the time he signed his new will, he believed I didn't deserve a penny of his fortune. Rebecca got everything: the family estate, the investment accounts, our mother's jewelry, even Dad's beloved classic car collection. All I got was a letter explaining why I was such a disappointment. Emma, Rebecca's voice pulled me back to the present. Are you still there? I'm here, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. Where's Tyler now? Boston Children's Hospital, she said. The doctors say without a transplant. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. I closed my eyes, memories flooding back. Tyler at 7, showing me his science fair project about space. At 9, falling asleep in my lap while I read him stories about dinosaurs. At 10, the last time I saw him, crying and confused as Rebecca dragged him away from me at Dad's funeral. Please, Rebecca whispered. I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but this isn't about me. It's about Tyler. I took a deep breath, my mind already racing with possibilities. I'll help, I said finally, but I have conditions. The relief in her voice was palpable. Anything, Emma, whatever you want. Not over the phone, I said firmly. I'll fly to Boston tomorrow. We'll discuss my terms in person. After hanging up, I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, my thoughts churning. Rebecca probably expected me to demand money, the inheritance that should have been mine, but I had something else in mind, something that would force her to face exactly what she'd done to our family. I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Boston, then pulled up my email. Need your help with something, I wrote to my old friend Marcus, now a private investigator. Time to uncover what really happened 5 years ago. The next morning, I packed a small suitcase and headed to the airport. As I waited for my flight, I thought about the last time I'd seen my father alive. He'd been so weak, barely able to lift his head from the pillow. Rebecca had been there, as always, playing the devoted daughter. Your sister understands family, he'd said, his voice raspy. She's built a life that would make your mother proud. I tried to explain that my research could help people, save lives even. But Rebecca had already convinced him that my work was just an excuse to avoid real responsibilities. The next day, he signed the new will. A week later, he was gone. The flight to Boston felt endless. I spent most of it reviewing the documents Marcus had already sent me, bank statements, phone records, emails he'd managed to recover. There was a pattern emerging, one that confirmed what I'd suspected all along. When I finally arrived at Boston Children's Hospital, Rebecca was waiting in the lobby. 5 years had changed her. Her perfectly highlighted hair now showed streaks of gray, and worry lines creased her face. But her designer clothes and jewelry told me she was still enjoying our father's money. Emma, she said, moving to hug me. I stepped back, keeping my distance. Where's Tyler? I asked. Her face fell slightly at my coldness. 7th floor. He's having dialysis right now. Good, I said, setting my bag down. Then we have time to talk about my conditions. We found a quiet corner in a hospital cafe. Rebecca ordered a latte with almond milk. Some things never changed, while I stuck to black coffee. Whatever you want, she said, her hands wrapped tightly around her cup. Money, the house, Dad's cars. I cut her off with a sharp laugh. You think this is about the inheritance? She blinked, confused. Isn't it? I know you were hurt when Dad changed his will. Hurt. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but intense. You manipulated our dying father, turned him against me, and stole everything we were meant to share. Hurt doesn't begin to cover it. I didn't, she started, but I held up my hand. Here's my first condition, I said, pulling out a folder. You're going to sign a full confession detailing exactly how you convinced Dad to change his will. Every conversation, every lie, every manipulation, everything. The color drained from her face. I can't. Emma, you don't understand. Second condition, I continued as if she hadn't spoken. You're going to explain to Tyler why he hasn't seen his aunt in 5 years. The whole truth, not whatever story you've been telling him. Emma, please. And third, I said, meeting her eyes, you're going to return every piece of Mom's jewelry you took. Not for me, but for the hospital's fundraising auction. Those pieces are worth enough to help a lot of sick kids. Rebecca's hands trembled as she set down her coffee. And if I refuse? I stood up, gathering my things. Then you better hope they find another donor. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. As I walked away, I heard her call after me. He's your nephew. You can't just let him suffer. I stopped, turning back to face her. You're right, he is my nephew. The same nephew you kept from me for 5 years. Remember that while you're making your decision. I spent the rest of the afternoon with Marcus, going over the evidence he gathered. Bank transfers made just before Dad changed his will. Phone calls to his lawyer that Rebecca had conveniently forgotten to mention. Emails suggesting she'd known about his cancer months before telling me. It's all here, Marcus said, pointing to his laptop screen. Every piece of the puzzle. She can't deny any of it. I nodded, feeling a mix of vindication and sadness. Send it to her email. Let her see what we have before she makes her choice. That night, I finally went to see Tyler. He was asleep when I entered his room, looking small and pale against the white hospital sheets. Medical equipment beeped steadily around him, monitoring every breath, every heartbeat. I sat beside his bed, gently taking his hand. Despite everything Rebecca had done, despite all the anger and hurt, I knew I would help him. He was innocent in all of this. But first, his mother needed to understand the true cost of her actions. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Fine. I'll do it. All of it. Just please. Help my son. I looked at Tyler's sleeping face, squeezing his hand gently. Don't worry, kiddo, I whispered. This time, we're going to fix everything. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital early, armed with documents from my lawyer and the confession forms Rebecca would need to sign. The hospital corridors were quiet, with only the occasional nurse hurrying past on early rounds. I found Rebecca in Tyler's room, curled up in a hospital chair, still wearing yesterday's clothes. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red from crying. Did you read the evidence Marcus sent? I asked, keeping my voice low to avoid waking Tyler. She nodded, unable to meet my eyes. How long have you known? I always suspected, I replied, setting my briefcase on a nearby table. But Marcus helped me prove it. The calls to Dad's lawyer, the bank transfers, even the emails to his doctors. You planned everything, didn't you? Rebecca's shoulders slumped. I was desperate, she whispered. The divorce had left me with nothing. Tyler was still so young, and you decided that gave you the right to destroy my relationship with our father? I pulled out the confession documents. Here, start writing. Everything. For the next hour, as Tyler slept peacefully, Rebecca wrote. Her hand trembled as she detailed how she'd first discovered Dad's cancer diagnosis in his medical records, 3 months before telling me. How she'd slowly planted doubts in his mind about my career choices, my lifestyle, my values. I told him you were wasting your life on research, she wrote, that you'd never give him grandchildren to carry on the family name. That Mom would have been disappointed in your choices. Each word felt like a knife, but I forced myself to keep reading as she wrote. She described manipulating Dad's medication schedule so he'd be more confused and suggestible when she talked to him. How she intercepted my calls and messages, making him think I was too busy to visit. The lawyer, I said, pointing to a blank space on the page. Tell me about the meetings with Dad's lawyer. Rebecca's face crumpled. I told him Dad was having doubts about your stability, suggested that leaving you such a large inheritance might enable self-destructive behavior. I even hinted that you might have a gambling problem. A gambling problem. I laughed bitterly. I was working 70-hour weeks at the research lab, trying to develop new treatments for childhood diseases. But you made me sound like some kind of addict. I'm sorry, she whispered, tears falling onto the paper. I was wrong. So wrong. Just then, Tyler stirred in his bed. His eyes fluttered open, widening when he saw me. Aunt Emma, he said weakly, is it really you? I moved to his bedside, taking his hand. Hey kiddo, been a while, huh? He looked between me and his mother, confusion clear on his face. Mom said you didn't want to see me anymore, that you were too busy with your work. Rebecca made a choking sound from her chair. I fixed her with a steady gaze. Would you like to tell him the truth, or should I? She stood up, hands shaking. Tyler, honey, I haven't been honest with you. About any of it. For the next 20 minutes, Rebecca confessed everything to her son. How she kept him from me, lied about why I wasn't around, even used him as a prop in her manipulation of our father. Tyler listened silently, tears streaming down his face. All those times I asked about Aunt Emma, he said finally, his voice small. All those birthdays and Christmases, you lied to me? I did, Rebecca admitted. I was selfish and scared, and I made terrible choices. I watched as Tyler processed this information, his young face showing a mix of hurt and betrayal that mirrored what I'd felt 5 years ago. But he was still just a child, facing not only his mother's deception, but also a life-threatening illness. The important thing, I said gently, squeezing his hand, is that I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. The doctor arrived then, clipboard in hand, ready to discuss the transplant procedure. As he explained the process, I noticed Rebecca standing off to the side, looking lost and small. Before we proceed, I said when the doctor finished, there's one more condition. I pulled out another document. This one's from my lawyer. It's an agreement to split Dad's estate equally, as it should have been from the start. Rebecca signed without hesitation, her hand steadier than it had been all morning. It should have been yours too, she said quietly. I see that now. The next few days were a whirlwind of medical tests and preparations. Through it all, I spent every possible moment with Tyler, making up for lost time. We talked about his interest in science, his favorite books, everything I'd missed over the past 5 years. Rebecca kept her distance, speaking only when necessary. I could see the shame weighing on her, but I wasn't ready to offer forgiveness. Not yet. The night before the surgery, as Tyler slept, she approached me in the hospital corridor. Why did you do it? I asked before she could speak. Really? Was Dad's money worth destroying our family? She leaned against the wall, suddenly looking very tired. I was scared, she said simply. After the divorce, watching you succeed in your career while I had nothing, I convinced myself I deserved more. That Tyler deserved more. I let fear and jealousy poison everything. I nodded slowly, and now? Now, she laughed humorlessly. Now I realize I had everything backwards. You were the strong one, building a career that helps people. I was the one taking the easy way out, manipulating people instead of standing on my own. As she spoke, I remembered something our mother used to say before she passed. The truth has a way of healing, even when it hurts at first. Maybe that's what this was, a painful but necessary step toward healing our broken family. The morning of the surgery arrived with a pale winter sun streaming through the hospital windows. As the medical team prepped me for the procedure, I thought about the journey that had brought us here. Tyler was already in the operating room when they wheeled me in. The last thing I saw before the anesthesia took effect was Rebecca in the observation area, her hands pressed against the glass, watching her son and the sister she had betrayed now joined in a way she never expected. When I woke hours later, groggy and sore, Marcus was sitting beside my bed. Surgery went perfectly, he said, squeezing my hand. Tyler's in recovery. The doctors are optimistic. I nodded, still too weak to speak. Through the haze of pain medication, I could see Rebecca sleeping in a chair by the window. She looked exhausted, the weight of everything finally showing on her face. The next few days passed in a blur of doctors, nurses, and recovery milestones. Tyler's body accepted the kidney well, his vitals improving steadily. We were placed in rooms next to each other, making it easier for the medical team to monitor both of us. One afternoon, about a week after the surgery, Rebecca came to my room. She was carrying a familiar wooden box, Mom's jewelry collection. I called the hospital's fundraising department, she said, setting the box on my bedside table. They're planning an auction next month. Everything's going into it, just like you wanted. I opened the box carefully, running my fingers over the familiar pieces. Mom's pearl necklace, the diamond earrings Dad had given her on their 25th anniversary, the sapphire bracelet that had been passed down through generations. Mom would have hated what you did, I said quietly, closing the box. But she would have hated even more what it did to us. Rebecca sank into the chair beside my bed. I know, she whispered. I think about that every day now. How disappointed she would be in me. The money's being transferred back tomorrow, she continued. Half of everything, just like it should have been. But I know that doesn't fix why I broke. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in years. Beyond the designer clothes and careful makeup, I saw my sister. The girl who'd held my hand at Mom's funeral, who'd helped me learn to ride a bike, who'd been my best friend before money and fear had poisoned everything. No, I agreed, it doesn't fix it. But maybe it's a start. That evening, I was strong enough to visit Tyler's room. He was sitting up in bed, some color finally returning to his cheeks. When he saw me, his face lit up with a smile that reminded me so much of when he was younger. Aunt Emma, he said, patting the bed beside him. Mom told me what you did. Not just the kidney, but making her tell the truth. I sat carefully, mindful of my still healing incision. Sometimes the truth is the best medicine, even when it hurts. He nodded, wise beyond his years. I was so mad when I found out she lied about you. But then I realized, if she hadn't called you about the transplant, we might never have known the truth. Sometimes life has a way of forcing us to face our mistakes, I said, thinking about Rebecca's confession, the returned inheritance, the healing that was slowly beginning. The next few weeks brought more recovery milestones. Tyler grew stronger each day, his natural resilience helping him bounce back quickly. I returned to my own apartment but visited daily, making up for lost time with my nephew. Rebecca and I began the slow process of rebuilding trust. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of tension, old hurts that would surface unexpectedly. But we were trying. The hospital's fundraising auction was a huge success. Mom's jewelry collection raised over $500,000 for the children's ward. During the event, Rebecca stood up and shared our story, not sparing herself in the telling. I let greed and fear destroy my family, she said to the crowd. But through my son's illness and my sister's incredible gift, I learned what really matters. It's not about money or inheritance, it's about the connections we have with each other. 6 months after the surgery, we gathered at the old family estate, now jointly owned again, for Tyler's 13th birthday. It was the first time we'd all been there since Dad's funeral. As I watched Tyler blow out his candles, surrounded by friends and family, I felt a presence beside me. Rebecca, holding 2 glasses of champagne. I've been thinking about Dad, she said, handing me one of the glasses. About what he would think of all this. I took a sip, considering her words. I think he would be sad about what happened, but happy about where we ended up. She nodded, watching her son laugh with his friends. You know, when I was manipulating him, telling him all those lies about you, I never stopped to think about what it would do to him. Believing his daughter had disappointed him. I let him die thinking the worst of you. And now, I asked. Now I know that you were the one who truly honored his legacy, not by keeping his money or his possessions, but by being someone who would sacrifice for family, even family that had hurt you deeply. Later that evening, as the party wound down, I found myself in Dad's old study. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. The leather chair, the wall of books, the family photos spanning decades. Tyler found me there, looking at a picture of Rebecca and me as children, arms around each other, grinning at the camera. Mom says you're thinking about moving back, he said, sitting beside me on the leather couch. Maybe doing your research at Boston Children's? I smiled. He'd clearly been hoping for this news. I'm considering it. They have an excellent research facility, and I hear they're particularly interested in post-transplant care in pediatric patients. His face lit up. Really? You mean? You beat around more. If that's something you'd want, I said carefully. I know a lot has changed. He hugged me suddenly, careful of my still tender side. Everything's changed, he said. But in a good way. Looking down at my nephew, I realized he was right. Everything had changed. The inheritance, our family dynamics, our understanding of what really mattered. Rebecca's betrayal had nearly destroyed us. But through Tyler's illness and recovery, we'd found a way back to each other. A month later, I accepted the position at Boston Children's Hospital. Rebecca helped me move into a house not far from the family estate. It wasn't perfect. We still had moments of tension, times when the past would resurface. But we were healing. One evening, as we sat on my new porch watching Tyler practice soccer in the yard, Rebecca turned to me. "You know," she said softly, "when I was scheming to get Dad's money, I thought I was securing Tyler's future. I never realized I was actually risking it, risking having you in his life, risking the relationship that would ultimately save him." I watched my nephew, healthy and strong, running in the fading sunlight. Sometimes the things we think we need aren't the things that really matter. She nodded, understanding the deeper meaning in my words. The inheritance she'd stolen hadn't brought her happiness. The truth, though painful, had brought us all something more valuable, a chance to be a family again. Tyler jogged up to the porch, breathless and grinning. "Aunt Emma, want to help me with my science project? It's about kidney function." I laughed, catching Rebecca's eye. She smiled back, both of us recognizing the irony and the blessing in his choice of topic. "Of course, kiddo," I said, standing up. "Let's go see what we can discover together." As we walked inside, I thought about how life has a way of coming full circle. 5 years ago, Rebecca's betrayal had torn our family apart. Now, through Tyler's illness and recovery, through truth and forgiveness, we were building something new, something stronger than inheritance, more valuable than any amount of money. Sometimes the greatest gifts come from the deepest wounds, and sometimes the path to healing leads us exactly where we need to be.